Picture this. You're walking through the dusty streets of Isfahan in the year 1598 AD, and you witness something that makes your blood run cold. The ornate gates of the royal palace swing open before you, and through them emerges a procession that defies all human decency. Hundreds of young boys, none older than 12, stumble forward in chains, their small hands bound with silk rope that seems almost mockingly gentle against their terror-stricken faces. Behind them march the Shah's guards, pushing the children toward a building that local whispers call Khanaya Tahvil, the House of Transformation. But the most horrifying truth isn't what you're seeing now, it's what you know comes next. You watch as these children disappear through doors they will never emerge from as boys, because what Shah Abbas the Great has planned for them represents one of the most systematic campaigns of child mutilation in recorded history. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. What you're about to hear isn't just another tale of royal excess. It's the story of how absolute power can transform pragmatism into sadism, security into slavery, and 1,000 innocent children into living monuments to one man's paranoid obsession with loyalty. The name Shah Abbas might be celebrated in Persian history books, but his legacy is written in the screams of boys who never lived to become men. You're about to discover how one ruler's twisted quest for perfect loyalty created a factory of human suffering that operated for decades, processing children like raw materials in humanity's darkest assembly line. Let's start with the architect of this nightmare. Shah Abbas wasn't born a monster. In fact, his early reign showed remarkable promise for Persia. When he ascended to the Safavid throne in 1588 at just 16 years old, many believed they were witnessing the dawn of a golden age. He modernized the military, expanded trade routes, and transformed Isfahan into one of the world's most beautiful cities. But absolute power has a way of corrupting even the most promising souls. And by 1595, something had fundamentally shifted inside the young Shah's mind. Maybe it was the constant assassination attempts that came with ruling an empire caught between Ottoman and Uzbek ambitions. Maybe it was the isolation of being the only person in a kingdom of millions who could never be contradicted, never be challenged, never be told he was wrong. Or maybe it was what happened to the person he trusted most, his childhood friend and closest advisor, Mirza Salman, who betrayed him to Ottoman spies in exchange for gold that would never spend. The betrayal of Mirza Salman broke something inside Shah Abbas that would never heal. On the night he discovered the treachery, witnesses reported hearing screams from the royal chambers that lasted until dawn. When morning came, Mirza Salman's body hung from the palace walls, but that wasn't enough. The Shah had realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his reign. In a world where anyone could be bought, bribed, or blackmailed, loyalty was impossible to guarantee. Unless, of course, you removed the very thing that made betrayal profitable. This is where our story takes its darkest turn, because what Shah Abbas devised wasn't just cruel, it was systematic, calculated, and implemented with the precision of a military campaign. He would create the world's first completely loyal palace guard, men who could never father dynasties to rival his own, men who could never be seduced by promises of wives or heirs, men whose very bodies would serve as guarantees of their faithfulness. But here's what makes this story even more disturbing than you could possibly imagine. Shah Abbas didn't just order the castration of his existing guards. He created an entire infrastructure of horror, a system designed to process hundreds of children every year, transforming them into what he called his perfect servants. And the scale of this operation was unprecedented in human history. You need to understand that what you're learning about isn't just cruelty. It's industrialized child abuse, organized with the precision of a military campaign and the efficiency of a slaughterhouse. But this is only the beginning of our story. What happened next would test the limits of human endurance and reveal the true cost of one man's paranoid quest for for absolute loyalty. The children selected for castration are transported to a complex of buildings outside Isfahan. And if you could see what happens inside these walls, you would understand why locals whisper about Khanaya Tahvil, the house of transformation, only in hushed, terrified tones. From the outside, it resembles a monastery or medical facility. Inside, you discover it's something far more sinister, a factory designed to strip away everything that makes these children human. You're about to learn about the procedure itself, performed by a team of royal surgeons who have perfected their technique through years of practice on living children. They use what they call complete castration, the removal of both testicles and penis, which virtually guarantees the boys can never develop adult male characteristics or reproduce. But here's what will make your blood freeze. The mortality rate is staggering. You watch as nearly 60% of the children die from blood loss, infection, or shock within the first week. You hear their screams echoing through the corridors. You smell the stench of infected wounds. You see small bodies carried out wrapped in blood-stained sheets. Those who survive face an ordeal that makes death seem merciful. You observe the physical recovery taking months, during which they're kept in isolation like animals, fed a carefully controlled diet, monitored by physicians who document every aspect of their transformation like they're conducting some grotesque scientific experiment. But as you witness their daily suffering, you realize the psychological trauma cuts far deeper than the physical wounds. These children must come to terms with the fact that they will never grow into men, never father children, never experience the fullness of human life. But what the historical records don't tell you, what you discover by listening to whispered survivor accounts, will shatter whatever faith you have left in human decency. Many of the boys try to end their own lives rather than accept what has been done to them. You see, the palace complex includes a special wing for difficult cases, children who refuse to eat, who attack their handlers with desperate fury, or who simply stare at walls for days without speaking, lost in private hells no adult should ever have to witness. Some are kept in restraints to prevent self-harm, their small wrists bound to prevent them from clawing at their wounds or trying to strangle themselves. Others are given opium to keep them compliant, turning them into hollow-eyed ghosts who drift through their recovery in a drugged haze. As you watch the months pass, those who survive begin to change in ways that go far beyond the physical mutilation. Their voices remain high and childlike forever. Their bodies never develop the muscle mass or bone density of adult men. But you observe something far more disturbing in the psychological changes, a kind of frozen development that leaves them emotionally dependent on their captors, desperate for approval from the very system that has destroyed them. This psychological transformation isn't accidental. You discover that Shah Abbas has consulted with scholars and physicians from across the known world to develop what we would now recognize as systematic psychological conditioning. You watch as the boys are taught that their sacrifice has elevated them above ordinary men, that their inability to reproduce makes them pure and holy, that their complete dependence on the royal household is actually a form of spiritual enlightenment. But here's what makes this story even more chilling than you could imagine. It works. You observe many of the surviving eunuchs becoming fanatically loyal to Shah Abbas, competing with each other for his attention and approval like children desperate for a parent's love. They develop their own hierarchy within the palace, their own customs and traditions, their own twisted form of pride in their mutilation. Most disturbing of all, you witness them becoming willing participants in recruiting new victims, helping to identify suitable candidates, and even assisting in the procedures that destroyed their own childhoods. But this nightmare is only reaching its peak. What comes next will reveal the true scope of Shah Abbas's systematized horror. The numbers are staggering when you consider the full scope of what you're witnessing. Over the course of Shah Abbas's 42-year reign, you learn that palace records document more than 3,000 boys processed through the House of Transformation. Of these, fewer than 1,000 survive to become palace guards. The rest, over 2,000 children, die horrible deaths during the procedure, succumb to infections that could have been prevented, or take their own lives rather than accept their fate. You try to comprehend what this means. 2,000 children who died horrible deaths simply to satisfy one man's paranoid vision of perfect loyalty. 2,000 families destroyed, their sons ripped away, never to return. 2,000 futures erased, dreams crushed, potential snuffed out before it could bloom. All to create a palace guard that would never betray their master because they literally had nothing left to live for except his approval. You observe these eunuch guards as they become legendary throughout the Persian Empire and beyond. They're known for their absolute loyalty, their willingness to die for the Shah, and their complete inability to form relationships outside the palace hierarchy. You watch European visitors to the Safavid court write about these perfect servants with a mixture of admiration and horror, noting how they seem to exist in a state of perpetual childhood despite their adult responsibilities. But what nobody talks about in the official histories, what you discover by listening to whispered conversations and reading hidden documents, is how these men, if you can still call them that, live with what has been done to them. You find surviving letters and diary fragments discovered centuries later in palace archives that reveal the psychological torment continuing throughout their lives. They write about phantom pains from body parts that no longer exist, about dreams of the families they will never have, about a constant sense of incompleteness that no amount of royal favor can fill. But the horror of this system extends far beyond its immediate victims. You're about to discover how the entire Persian court becomes infected with the atmosphere of systematic cruelty. One particularly haunting account you discover comes from a eunuch named Rostam, who served as head of palace security for over 20 years. In a private letter to his sister, you read these words that will chill you to the bone. I am neither man nor woman, neither child nor adult, neither alive nor dead. I exist in the spaces between things, serving a master who created me by destroying me. Sometimes I wonder if the boys who died during the cutting were the lucky ones. You witness how the psychological damage extends beyond the eunuchs themselves. The entire palace becomes infected with an atmosphere of systematic cruelty that poisons everyone who enters. You see servants who are not eunuchs living in constant fear that they might somehow displease the Shah and find themselves facing the knife. You observe children of palace workers being hidden away, lest they catch the attention of recruiters, always searching for new candidates to feed the machine. Even Shah Abbas himself seems affected by what he has created. You watch court records describe a man who becomes increasingly paranoid and isolated as his reign progresses, trusting no one except his mutilated guards, surrounded by the living evidence of his own cruelty. You observe how he never marries, never has children of his own, and dies alone in 1629, attended only by the eunuchs whose lives he systematically destroyed. You're witnessing the legacy of Shah Abbas's eunuch program extending far beyond his own reign. The practice continues under his successors, though never again on such a massive scale. You see the last of the Safavid eunuch guards dying in the early 18th century, taking with them the final living memories of one of history's most systematic programs of child abuse. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this entire story, something that should make you question everything you think you know about how history is written, is how completely it has been erased from popular memory. You discover that modern Iran celebrates Shah Abbas as one of its greatest rulers, focusing on his military victories and architectural achievements while glossing over the systematic torture of children that made his reign possible. You walk through the beautiful mosques and palaces of Isfahan today, admiring their intricate tilework and soaring domes, but you find no memorials to the 1,000 boys who died to protect them. You realize this erasure is not accidental. It reflects a broader human tendency to forget atrocities when they serve the interests of power, to focus on the achievements of great men while ignoring the suffering they inflicted on the powerless. As you reach the end of this forgotten chapter of history, you're forced to confront what it tells you about the nature of absolute power and its capacity to corrupt not just individuals but entire systems of government. You see that Shah Abbas created his eunuch guards because he believed that complete loyalty could only be achieved through complete subjugation. In doing so, you witness him revealing a fundamental truth about tyranny. It always requires the destruction of human dignity to maintain itself. You understand that the boys who died in the House of Transformation were not just victims of one man's cruelty. They were casualties of a system that treated human beings as objects to be modified, controlled, and discarded according to the whims of those in power. You realize their story serves as a warning about what happens when we allow authority to operate without accountability, when we prioritize order over justice, when we forget that the true measure of a civilization is not its palaces or armies, but how it treats its most vulnerable members. Today, as you return to your own life, you carry with you the voices of those who cannot speak for themselves. You remember that behind every grand historical narrative lie countless individual stories of suffering and survival. You know that the eunuch guards of Shah Abbas may be forgotten by history books, but their story endures as a testament to both the depths of human cruelty and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. In honoring their memory, you ensure that their suffering was not meaningless, that their stories serve as both warning and inspiration for future generations who must choose between the easy path of obedience and the difficult road of standing up for human dignity. If this story has moved you as deeply as it should, take a moment to like this video and share it with others who need to hear these forgotten voices. These stories deserve to be told, and it's only through sharing them that we can hope to prevent such atrocities from happening again. Comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these hidden truths together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared commitment to remembering those history tried to forget.